Thanks everyone for coming. Welcome to the last, I believe, breakout session of Appian 2024. Hope you've had a great conference and we're really glad to have you with us. So this topic today is underrated qualities of Appian architecture. So by way of introduction, I'm Matt Hilliard, Chief Product Architect. I have been in the product group for more than a decade, at Appian for 2 decades. And with me is Sylvan Furt, who is from Customer Success.
Yep, I've been at Appian for about 18 years. So Matt and I have a total of about 40 years of combined Appian experience.
Oh, you don't have to put it like that. It's making me feel old. Okay, so, but what I thought we would do today is get a chance to talk to you guys about some of the things about the way Appian is put together, the way it's architected that well, I'm calling them underrated. I mean, there's always room for disagreement if you're familiar with sports talk and so forth about these kinds of things. But even at a conference as big as Appian World, we often don't have time to talk about some of the intricacies, and we only hit the high points. So today we want to talk about some things that we think could be better appreciated and that we really have appreciated over the years and seen bring success to our customers. So with that, we're talking about architecture, so I'm going to show 1 or 2 examples of architecture. Really, to be honest, this is when I do these Dev Jam things and there's like rival presenters, I always make sure to have some cool slides at the outset to try to get a few more attendees to like defect. But this is I believe a mosque, really cool sort of architecture. Here's something that's not so religious, the Las Vegas Sphere. These are both actually examples of architecture. The goal of this architecture is to inspire, to amaze, I guess, for different motives. But architecture has implications to it sometimes that are not just how we feel. There can be practical implications, right? So this is like a very cool looking sort of hotel restaurant situation, but would you want to be crossing that street in order to get to it while cars are zooming by? Maybe not. Or would you like to be paddling down this aqueduct thing? It's a great view, but I don't know. I think I probably wouldn't have the stomach for it. When I think about Appian architecture, I think about all the hours and hours that I've spent both talking to people on the product team, talking to people like Sylvan, who are experts in what's happening in the field, trying to understand how we can architect things in order to make customer success not his customer success department, but customers successful to the greatest extent we can. And I think that'll come out of some of what we're talking about here. Even with this session, I could talk for hours about this. Everybody would leave, the conference would end. I'd still be up here talking if that was allowed. So fortunately for you, we have a clock ticking down. We're not gonna go over our time. So we're gonna talk about 3 things. So data fabric, private AI, and then SAIL, Appian's interface technology. And basically, I'm going to talk about things from the concept perspective and on the ivory tower of the product team, and then Sylvan is going to weigh in with his perspective from his many years of experience in the field with real customers solving real problems. So with that, and I think hopefully we'll have time at the end for maybe some questions, but if not, I'll certainly hang around and I'll speak for Sylvan and say he probably will too. But I'll hang around and talk afterwards. So with that, I'm just going to launch into it. So we're going to start with data fabric. Data fabric, you probably have heard, hopefully you've heard our description, and we heard at the keynote yesterday that a really cool thing about data fabric is that we connect data, allow you to relate data from multiple sources, right? So no matter where the data lives, you can connect it together into a cohesive business set of relationships based on the business model. Well, that's really great. We worked really hard to make that happen. I'm very proud of it, but it's adequately rated. We talk about it all the time, right? So as well we should. So today I wanted to glide past that and talk about another aspect, which, I mean, there's probably a range of Appian experience. I'm not saying this is like a secret or anything, but it might not be as evident to people. And that is, so the way this works, our data fabric technology works, is something called synced records. And the way that plays out is that we are going to an external system. That system stays, this remains the system of record, right? We're not having to like copy all your data and re-engineer it into one cohesive, that's like a nightmare sort of project. So we let the data stay where it is. We copy that in at intervals, let's say, like often every night. From there, we query the local synced copy. And then when you write data back out from Appian, we take care of updating both the original system of record as well as that copy. So from your perspective, even though theoretically it's happening every night, in practice, the data is live. As you make changes, you see the updates and so forth. Now, I give you that background because of what the sort of implication that comes from that is, if you think about the way queries are made, sort of, I guess, in, I don't know, a normal system, these lines are meant to indicate like different queries that you might make of a database, as well as different web service calls you might make, all in order to create a rich experience, a rich sort of dashboard in this case, I guess it says. And if this is slow or if this has problems, you might see people trying to cache the results of those queries, right? That's sort of the simplest first step you might do. But the problem with this style of caching, sort of speaking generically, but essentially you are hoping that, okay, somebody comes in, they view the first page of a grid. We make the query to the database to get that data. We cache that, great. But then they click next page. Well, now we're going back to the database because we're just going, the cache isn't helping us. We go back and we get the second page. Then they filter that by a different thing. Oops, now we go back again, right? And then another user comes in, but there's a filter on that query related to who they are. Again, we're going back. And the same is true for web services. So with Appian's data fabric, because we're syncing these records together, we're making a single call out to these different systems in order to get the data into the local copy. And then all those queries that are being made from your rich experiences are just going against that local copy. So there's a couple of really valuable implications of this. The first is that if there's only one API to build, if you're using a sort of API architecture, there's only one database query for your DBA to worry about if it's a database. And that can be a big boost because we often have seen that Appian teams are working at the speed of low code. They're moving fast. They're building things, they're iterating, they're getting feedback, they're working in an agile fashion, and other teams in an organization are struggling to keep up. So anytime we can avoid crossing those organizational boundaries and empowering a team to find their way to success, that really, that's been very helpful for us. And by, this way, of course, the queries against the local cache we're handling the performance optimization. So there's just a lot less to worry about. There's less load on those external systems as well, because we're not running quite so many queries to them. And so basically, there's a lot of like downstream effects, I guess, is what I'm trying to say, of that freeing you from, oops, I like knocked over this web service because we put too much load on it. Oh, I have to negotiate with the DBA over getting these indexes added to a table, and all those kinds of things. That's some quick thoughts about data fabric, and now I'm going to hand off to Sylvan to give his perspective. So.
Thank you, Matt. So from my perspective, data fabric is really it's really a game changer on how you think about creating your domain model and then putting all this data together. Typically, when you start a project, either discovery or sprint zero, you start by focusing on the key entity that make up your business use case. So in the example here, we have order submission and order status. And then it could be that you are developing an order management application. So this is the beginning. But as you discover more user stories, as you drill down with the end users, typically it ends up like this. Orders is still your main entity, order submission is still your main entity, but then you have to deal with opportunities, employees, all the details of this data that is not just in Appian, but across your organization. So here we have SAP, Oracle, Salesforce, and plenty of other systems. And you know that if you want to be successful, you can't just care about the two pieces of data that you originally thought about in Appian. You have to reach out to all of this and bring it together, either to offer the right UI in order to be able to put together this process model and its business application. So in that sense, Data Fabric is really, really amazing. This presentation is about making you feel that Appian is awesome. So Data Fabric in that case is really amazing because, as Matt explained, once you get all of this into our caching layer and it's in Appian, there is no more problem to query, to join, to aggregate, to report. Like all the data is treated as if it was local, and you can do pretty much everything that you want with it. If you had to do this in high code, not in Appian, you would have to deal with web services. You would have to deal with databases and probably private APIs to do it. But once it's in Appian, it's just very, very easy. To query the data, it doesn't matter where it came from. There is pretty much two expressions, the query record type and query record by identifier. And that's it. It doesn't matter. Even if it came from a database or web service, using these two functions, you can query, aggregate, and get the power out of your data. It's pretty fast because it's already local. We don't do the round trip to the source system every time we query the data. You can easily secure it, as opposed to having to secure all of these other systems that probably have different authentication, authorizations, different way to know what the user have access to. Once it's in Appian, it's all done by expression. You can even do row-level security if you wanted to be very, very granular in how you secure the data. And finally, it's, I said, deeply configurable in the slide here. But what I meant is that in my experience working on many projects, you have to be very careful when you query your data fabric using one of these functions, because if you go back to this and I were to query for another submission, if I don't configure my expression to only get me the fields and the relationship that I want, I will get the entire structure, which is great. In some use case, you need to, but you have to be very careful on how you do it. You will be querying way too much data, and then you will have to deal with it through your interfaces, and that can have some performance implication. So if there is one takeaway from this slide here is always be mindful of querying the data fabric and only specifying the relationships, the attributes, and the attributes of the relationships that you need. That will make for a much better end product, and you will avoid some weird edge cases. And the flip side of that is, in order to update the data fabric, it's, as Matt explained, it's also very, very simple. Depending on the source system, you can either write record, use the smart service called write record, or you can use some kind of native API web services, depending, if that's what that source system is about. But the point is, regardless of how you do it, the cache will always be in sync. We guarantee you that the data that you will see through our data fabric is the latest and greatest that you have across your enterprise. The takeaway on that slide here was the last bullet. We released that recently, and we had a project where we did some refactoring to use it, but I don't know if you're aware that now, through the write record smart service, we can actually cascade the update. So, in the past, if you had multiple related records and you were trying to write them, you had a kind of a spidery process model, where you write one record type, you grab the ID or the primary key, you set it in the other related records at the foreign key, and then you write that, and then you get these keys, and then you write the next one. It's complicated. It was ugly and hard to maintain and design. And now we can just use that one smart service, and we write the entire structure at once. We did it recently for one of our projects, and we went to about 20 smart service in that process model down to 2. So easier to maintain and to develop, and then much faster as well. So I definitely recommend this one. And finally, that slide here is about some of the concerns that I hear from our customers about adopting data fabric. And the main two that I hear about is either there's too much data, or the data is really the source system that is the source of truth for that data also keep changing, and there are updates being made outside of Appian, so the Appian cache becomes stale. And yes, these are two very real concerns, and depending on the use case, they may invalidate the use of our data fabric. But I wanted to point out that there are ways that you can deal with that. So if you have too much data, consider source filters. It's a great way to narrow down the scope of all of the data that you are going to bring in, And the way to think about it is, in the example of the order application that we had, you may have millions and millions of orders, way more than what we can actually do right now in Data Fabric. But do you really need all of them for your application? Is your application really going to manage orders that are 10 years old, orders that are already completed? Or if your application is about completing the orders and managing the orders that are in progress right now, then set a source filter to only grab this data. For the external updates, we have a feature that we released a few quarters ago called the webhook. If you're not familiar with what that is, it's a way we pretty much create an API for you that the source system can call when there's an event, and Appian needs to be aware of it. So we recently did it with an integration with Salesforce, where the customer data in Salesforce was being changed by the salespeople. But we also had this copy in Appian as a cache in the Data Fabric. And setting up the webhook between Salesforce and Appian only took a few minutes. And then we get an update, we get a notification every time the data is modified. We are able to trigger the refresh of our cache, and everything is always in sync and up to date. It's very, very simple. I think there's a couple of clicks in Appian for the webhook to be published, and it's a inline configuration for Salesforce to put this together. So I know sometimes Data Fabric may not apply, but I really, really strongly recommend that you explore these use cases and talk to us if you need recommendation and advice on how to actually make it work. But you should definitely not pass up the benefits of what we can provide.
All right, thanks, Sylvan. And next, did you know that we have AI with Appian? Anybody? I mean, maybe it's been mentioned a few times at this conference. Well, in keeping with the sort of underrated angle and trying to stick with stuff that might be a little new for you, I wanted to talk about one answer to a question that I've heard a lot from customers and partners and even Appian employees in a few cases over the past year, which is, if I'm interested in AI, why Appian, right? Like Appian is this process automation company. Meanwhile, I'm reading about OpenAI and Microsoft and Anthropic, and these are AI companies, and well, Microsoft is an everything company, I guess, but there's these AI specialist companies. So what is Appian bringing to the table? Are we training our own LLMs? Are we pouring billions of dollars of money into AI development? And the answer is no, obviously. So, but let me explain why I think that we bring a lot to the table. So, we think in the past, and by the past I guess I mean before the generative AI sort of hype explosion of the last year and a half, AI you think of as you have a training set, and I guess I'm training a model here to recognize movie genres somehow. Hopefully I'm giving them more information than just the title. But basically, you have a training set, you feed that in a lot more than this into training, and you train a model. And this is in fact how AI skills, our original AI skills around document processing work, where you upload some example documents and you can train your own model. And it's private AI, nobody else benefits from that model, your data is kept private. So, but this is sort of the original AI paradigm. And the goal was that by having a good enough training set, you would make the model do the right thing in most cases. So you get some new thing that's outside of the training set, you pass that to the model, and then it spits out the right thing. And we have stuff for our AI skills to make it really easy to evaluate the accuracy and all that kind of thing. But with generative AI, and I'm not talking about Appian, I'm just talking about in general, right? Like you have this massive foundation model that some company poured literally billions of dollars into training, and it is what it is. It's you have these like prompts and so forth to try to steer it a little bit, but it kind of says what it's going to say. It's like the uncle at Thanksgiving, like you never know quite where he's going to take something. And we've all seen the results of that sometimes, right? Like that we get these headlines about, oh, like the chatbot told me this, or like I asked this question, it gave me this completely wrong answer. There's a lot of anxiety now about generative AI, and frankly, to be honest, it's somewhat well-founded because there's real problems out there with trusting the model. So Matt Calkins talked about the fact that we're using retrieval augmented generation. That's a common industry thing. It's not just Appian. And what that involves is we're allowing, instead of making sure that the generative AI model has all the knowledge we need, because it might know something about Charles Dickens and Panama, but you want it to know about your business, right? So what we do is we augment the generation that it's doing with information that we've retrieved from documents and from databases. And what's important here, though, for Appian, in Appian's case, is that we're doing that from within the user's security context. So the way I try to explain this is the AI is not like this Appian AI that's able to see everything and do everything. It's acting as an extension of you. And what that means is that when it goes to query the database, when it goes to access documents, it's doing that with your permissions, the security that you would have if you were doing these things. And going back to my original question, why Appian? Well, we've spent years building the sort of deep security models that we know that enterprises need to secure their data, and including all the way up to, like, for example, really easy to configure row-level security in the data fabric. So that security is in place. And so now you're not depending on the AI model to sort of know the right thing to say. Like, oops, I shouldn't, this is PII, and I don't want to disclose this information to this particular user. Like, God help us if a generative AI is making those decisions. Instead, like, the system that we've built over the last decade is making those security decisions. And then AI is then just an avenue to help locate the right thing and present it in a way that's friendly to the user. So with that, that's my spiel on this.
As Matt said, I'm sure you have heard about AI through the conference, or even you use it through ChatGPT or other means. But I was very confused when I first heard about it, and exactly what is a prompt? What can I do with this? What kind of question can I ask the AI for it to answer? So this is very generic. I mean, it is an Appian use case. You could use it. We built, someone else a colleague built this into Prompt Builder in Appian. And I just want to spend a minute, show you what the prompts look like if you're unfamiliar, and what kind of things you can get with it. So very simple prompt, about a couple of paragraphs of data. And what this does, it will allow the AI to compare two record types, and it'll just show you the difference. It's a common use case. Everybody wants to know what's changing their data. You probably build that and put it in a UI as well, where the business user wants to see what was the data before and after an update was made, and not just the entire data, but like every field specifically for auditing purposes. And depending on your data structure, it could be complicated. If you're not a SAIL guru like Matt, it's gonna take a while to do it. This took that guy about 5 minutes to write. The prompt is very simple, right? I want you to compare two record types. I want you to display the results in HTML in 3 columns. And then here is some more detailed information. Compare the fields and the sub record, not just the first level. And that's the result. Right? I took the HTML, I put it into the rich text editor, and this is rendered in Appian. Super simple. The changes are colored in yellow to the right. And all of this done without a single line of code. Right? All written in plain English through Prompt Builder. This is a very simple use case, obviously, and I don't think anybody will actually use Gen AI for that, because you have to pay every time you invoke it, so you may as well just spend the time to write the expression. But it should show you that it could do anything. Very complex use cases or very simple use cases. These are 3 of my favorite. The first 2, extract entity and route case, we actually use that in Appian. Our support team use generative AI to extract data from support cases. If you have worked with our support engineers before, you know that there could be quite a bit of back and forth. There's a lot of information that they capture in case notes that you have access to, and sometimes it's pages and pages of this communication. So when we onboard new engineers, or when we need someone else to come into the case to help, they don't have time to go through all of this. And also it's confusing. Depending on which way you read the history, you don't really know what the current status is. So with Gen AI and a very simple prompt, we get a summary of the case. We are able to extract the entities such as the customers, what was the issue, what is the current status, is there a resolution. The prompt is very simple, and then every time we run it, we save hours and hours of work. And it's not something that you could have easily done without Gen AI. You could have extracted the entities, but the summarization is really something that you need the AI to understand and be able to get the intent out of these case notes. So very, very powerful. The second use case that I have built in the past, not with AI, but with old-fashioned regular expressions and a lot of rules and if statements, and really like getting headaches writing that logic, is routing. Because you have a case coming in, and depending on a bunch of information, some of it being unstructured, you want to know where to route that case. Our support team also use this to triage our support cases. So when you have a support case coming in, they know if it should be going to John, who specializes in performance programs, or to Becky, that specializes in VPN. So using AI for this and a very simple prompt, you are able to extract entities and then route the case to the right person. Again, you could do it without AI. It would be very brittle. Every time there's a different structure or more information, the logic probably will break. AI is able to do it much better. And the next one I wanted to highlight is kind of the follow-up of the first two, is suggesting the next best action, which is kind of like routing, but with a suggestion on top of the AI, to know that when you have a case, based on the notes or based on the current status and based on all of the information about that case and other cases that are similar, what should you do next? Obviously, we will not, or you should not let the UI make the decision for you. But if the UI is able to suggest it, saving you hours and hours of thinking or just going through notes and all the cases, that's also a great value add. If you take anything away, is prompts can be extremely powerful. There are tons of use cases, but really you should consider them for. You should think about a good use case before you use them, because they can do anything, or pretty much anything. It's very easy to get lost in the buzzword of, oh, I want AI and I want to use it, but you should have a use case first. That will make the difference.
All right, so the last section we're doing here is Appian SAIL. This is near and dear to my heart. I was on the original team that developed SAIL before its original release back in, I think 2012, 2011, somewhere in that time frame. And so in my extremely objective and unbiased opinion, it still doesn't get as much credit as it should. And first, I want to talk about, so a couple things. The first, though, is to give you a sense for why we even built it in the first place. Because I think that we've sort of purposely obscured this by building really nice interface design tools. So we used to have, before we built SAIL, so like in 2010, 2009, we had a form experience. Hopefully, most of you have never seen or even heard of such a thing, although it is still in the product in some hard-to-find ways. But there's a static form designer, similar to the kind of form designers you would get from Google Forms or SurveyMonkey or something like that. But since we're like an enterprise system, people quickly were saying, hey, I want to be able to, I don't just want to type in a label for a text field. I want to make that sort of dynamic, right? I want to be able to configure that at runtime with some sort of data, whether it's about the current user or something about the data that's being displayed or something relevant to the current moment. And what we found is that as we tried to make richer and richer UIs, it was getting extremely painful to try to add in all these little dynamic elements into a static structure, because it was expensive for us to develop and it was hard for people to maintain. And the only fallback back then was to JavaScript and essentially a high code sort of worst of both worlds situation. So what we decided to do, and unfortunately I can't take credit for this, this was another person's idea, but was to sort of flip that. And so we put the interface structure is actually determined at runtime. And so what that allows you to do is, based on what's going on, often for data coming from a database or services, you can actually switch up how your UI looks based on what's happening. And I don't know, it's a subtle point. I think that, and some of you probably know it very well, but it's, I think, something that's very powerful with SAIL that I still don't see happening. It's 10 years later. I still don't see that happening a lot elsewhere in the industry. And it's really helpful for making the kinds of experiences that people expect. The second thing I wanted to call out about SAIL, which is distinct, although it is related to that sort of dynamism as a first-class citizen perspective, is that reuse of SAIL interfaces. So if you have a UI like this, you could decide, I'm going to reuse this section. Okay. So you can, on a different page, maybe a form or something like that, you might be able to have the exact same section, and you only have to build it once, and then you use it in 2 different places. But you could also take the contents of a section. You could take multiple sections and like in their like 2-column format. You could take just a single component. And you can even take, just a single configuration on a component. So none of this is required. Like, you don't have to set any of this stuff up for reuse if it doesn't make sense. We don't want to slow you down and essentially add red tape to the process of building. But on the other hand, where it makes sense, you can reuse at almost any level, basically wherever it's going to make sense for your application and your use case. And that's really powerful. It wasn't easy to do this. So, maybe this is just my scars, because we said the word composability a lot in meetings as we tried to figure out how you can freely compose interfaces based on these differing levels of granularity and so forth. We worked really hard to make that as seamless as possible. And real quick, the last thing before I'll hand it off to Sylvan to give his perspective again is that I mentioned that SAIL, we first shipped SAIL back in I think 2013. An interface that was built for SAIL in 2013, I mean, frankly, it's changed a lot. We've improved it a great deal over all those years. An interface that was built for SAIL in 2013 still works today, like flawlessly, no problems. And I mentioned this actually because I talked to somebody at this conference, and he was saying like, man, like I've done a long-time customer. He's like, I've done all these upgrades. I've never had to update anything. Like, that's such a relief. And in fact, he mentioned the fact that they were a long enough time customer. They had a form from before we had SAIL. So this older technology that you can't make anything new in the product that uses that, but we still support those old interfaces. And that's all because what we want to make sure is that you guys can easily upgrade to the latest and greatest, get the best stuff without having to worry about, oops, that upgrade broke this, or we have to retest all of that stuff. So we work really hard to make sure that we retain backwards compatibility, but also move the product forward and deliver new capabilities and not be sort of chained to the past. And if I had another hour, I'd tell you how we do that. We actually have patents for it, but we don't have that. So instead, I'm going to hand it off to Sylvan. Sylvan, what do you think about SAIL?
Thank you, Matt. Just a comment on what Matt mentioned about composing and being able to reuse. You can also store the UI components into local variables. I'm sure you guys know that, but it's not just being returned by the UI to be displayed. You could also put them in local variables and then pass them around like any other objects, which is very powerful.
Careful what you recommend here.
It gives me a headache sometimes when I have to think about this. But yeah, you can compose it the way you want. It's incredible. It is truly magical, right? I used to be a Java developer. I did a lot of UI in JavaScript and other Java-related technology. And SAIL is just much easier. It takes a while to get used to it. It's kind of a different format of writing the expression and the function as opposed to a more descriptive language. But it is, once you get used to it, you can do great stuff. Right? If you think about it, the entire platform is powered by this technology. The UIs are in SAIL, the expressions, the security, the integration. Like, it's one language for the entire platform. You can't find that on other product. If you were developing in Java, you will need to do Java. You probably need to know how to do WSDL. If you still use old kind web services, you need to know SQL. If you wanted to connect to a database, I mean, that would be a lot of stuff. With Appian, once you have set up your data fabric, the data is in there. SAIL is the only thing you need to know. One language for everything. Another thing that you may have heard this morning on the keynote, it was displayed very quickly, is that it renders everywhere. Once you develop your UI, you can run it in the browser, on a tablet, on a mobile device. You can embed it into the site. it's not something that you can do with the technology. You will have to be an Android developer to put it on a phone. You will have to be an expert in JavaScript to make sure it works in all of these different flavors of browsers. We take care of this for you. So again, it's like SAIL magic. And finally, one of my favorite features is that it's extensible. I still love coding, so I love to put together either plugins in Java that give me new kind of functions that I can use with SAIL, or even additional UI components with our component plugin to render data differently or provide additional visualization for the users. And all of this can be easily integrated as a function, and then it's just using SAIL to power it. So it's really a great technology. And I wanted to finish my slide with showing you how we use SAIL when we typically run projects. I'm sure you have the same thing in your organization. So SAIL is really the base, it's the framework, comes with the platform. And on top of it, when we start a project, we usually deploy a couple of plugins because we know that you may want to do a regular expression, so we have a plugin for that. So we have some small plugins that we deploy right away to kind of expand and extend what we can do out of the box. And on top of this, we installed what we call our global application, which is actually really called global. We are not very good at naming. And then this contains a lot of low-level function and expressions that we reuse all the time on all projects. You know, formatting, validations, testing if a value is really a zip code or a phone number. You know, these kind of things that you have to build and you have to use everywhere, but we just don't want to rebuild them again. So we package all of this into our global application, and we know it's working because we test it, we maintain it, and that really helps. And so all of this, so SAIL is managed by Appian as a platform. The plugin and the global application typically becomes the responsibility of the person that is managing Appian on the customer side, either your center of excellence or maybe your platform owner. But once it's started, it's their responsibility to maintain it. And after that, that layer here, the common business application, is optional. Sometimes we see it in large organizations, sometimes we don't. But it's really a way to break up even further the kind of common features that you have. You may have an HR department that has a very specific look and feel, or you may have an IT department that wants something different. And so we create this kind of mid-tier level applications that contains all of the reusable and common functions and UI for these specific groups of users. And then finally, on top of this, you have your real business application. This is what gives the end user their business value and what is displayed on the screen. And the arrow on the side represents the dependencies. Like the object in your business application will call the object in your common application, which may or may not call global, which may or may not call the plugins, and eventually all the way down to SAIL. So you see that you call it that way. You should never do it the other way. Like if you have objects all the way at the bottom here in global application that start calling object in your business application at the top, you start to have these weird cyclical relationships that could be quite difficult when you do release, because which package are you pushing first? Right? Now they are related. You need to push everything together. It becomes a mess. So always just follow the arrow here. No cyclical relationships. And this is great. The reason we actually do this is because we know that the layer below us is working. The global application has been tested for years. We maintain it, and that helps with the code quality and reuse. Like we are reusing these objects all the time. We don't have to recode them. The developers are faster. It helps the team velocity. Right? You don't have to recreate the wheels every time. You know it's there. And also, it helps with quality because we have tested it, or you have tested it if you have common business applications. It really helps. It's like reusing libraries in other languages, except you create your own layers of application on top of SAIL. Yeah, that's it. I recommend that you guys look into something like this if you don't. It's an easier way and a better way to organize your application.
Okay, thanks, Sylvan. We're getting increasingly frantic signals from the back that we should wrap up. No, it's fine, it's fine. We're good. I think we're good. So thanks everybody for your attention. I hope we were able to talk to you about some new things. And thanks. We don't have time for running a mic around, but I'll be up here afterwards for anybody with questions. Thank you.